Hello, listeners, and welcome to this, the final pop screen of 2023. This is the Geek Show podcast that looks at the good, the bad, and the preposterous of movies either starring, about, or by pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from documentaries to science fiction, from country and western to hip-hop. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a writer for the Geek Show and Byline Times, and a short filmmaker. And I've been joined this week by...
Aidan, my lifestyle determines my death style. F.
Slight spoiler for what we're covering. Yes, that's right, listeners. It's the best of Pat Boone.
No, to be serious, really. Aidan F. Letterboxd user, occasional contributor to the Geek Show, film industry worker. Yeah, that kind of person. Hello.
Hello there. Yes. So, yes, we're covering Some Kind of Monster, the Metallica documentary by Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky, which I've been wanting to cover for ages, and this is kind of why I've had some difficulty covering it in the 100+ episodes we've done so far, despite the fact that I have an absolute tin ear for metal and I don't like Metallica.
Fair enough. Okay. Whereas I'm kind of a casual Metallica fan, and to be honest, metal is not one of my go-to genres of music. So,
Yeah,
you got the right person here.
One indifferent, one slightly less indifferent. But no, I felt like it was worth covering this because I didn't. When I cover bands that I'm not fond of, I don't just want to like rag on a band I don't like for an hour or so. I find that quite boring. But I think also the film deserves to be taken at least partly seriously.
Yes, because it's a fascinating story behind Some Kind of Monster, and that kind of thing, and that's why I was pretty much drawn to it as well, because I mean, just going into this documentary, it's one of those pieces that came out in the early noughties, but at the same time, it just goes through what went down in one of perhaps one of the worst records of the 21st century.
Well,
yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, my memory, and I suspect my memory would be found to be at fault if I could go back and read the reviews from the time, but maybe not. My memory is that Saint Anger, the album that they are recording in this film, was not it didn't get terrible reviews. It didn't get reviews as bad as, was it Death Metallic, the one they did after?
The one they did after, I think, from what I heard from Death Magnetic, because I've never listened to that record, so I can't comment, but from what I've heard, it got better reviews, weirdly.
Okay.
But I think that might have been. I think some of the criticism drawn to that record was just a mixing thing, because apparently, as soon as you play the mixing on that record or play the CD, your eardrums explode. So,
and not in the way that you want with a heavy metal band, wasn't it? It was one of those very mid to late 2000s records where everything is pushed up to the front of the mix, and it just ends up being staticky and awful, that kind of Jackknife Lee production. So yeah, that. But for some reason, I remember a lot more criticism around that time than there was of this. I think Saint Anger was probably one of those records. Like the classic example is "Be Here Now" by Oasis, where a band who are so big and have such a devoted fan base release a record that is so eagerly anticipated that all of the critics just think, I don't like it, but maybe that's just me not getting it. So they go easier on it than it deserves, and the next record ends up getting the shit because, like, I
Yeah,
don't.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's misremembering it, but I don't remember in the reviews of this film anyone talking about what is now one of the funniest things about it, which is that Metallica are going through all of this stress to make a record that is one of the most reviled records ever made.
And this is Metallica we're talking about because, like, a decade later, they would do another record, but this time with Lou Reed, and you just think that's baffling in of itself as
Now
well.
that I've heard, because I am a Lou Reed fan, and
I
yeah,
am too, yeah.
what an insane record Lulu is.
So it's just mad, and it's just from the opening bars of that record that you realize how much of a treat you are. It's I will cut my legs and tits off when I think of Boris Karloff on the dark
Yes.
side of the moon.
Yes.
And you just think, what the hell?
And that one at least has Lou delivering it. Later on, you've got James Hetfield delivering Lou Reed lyrics, and it's like, one of the things about Hetfield, as we will see in this documentary, is that there is not a shred of irony or camp in his persona.
No.
It just does not exist for him at all.
Yeah,
And
and yeah, and kind of thing is that the guy. I mean, I like early Metallica as much as I can, but at the same time, the guy writes some of the most meathead lyrics I've ever read on page. Let's
and
be
we'll get
honest.
into that as well.
Um,
Um, yeah, actually, yeah. Shall we talk about that? Because that is brought up in the film that he has, for some reason that I can't quite remember. I don't know whether it's part of the personal stresses he's going under, but he has to adopt a new method of writing lyrics, and it has to be more sort of written down and premeditated. And hearing that and listening to the actual lyrics on Saint Anger, it makes you realize that James Hetfield has a very individual way of writing lyrics, which is to like get one good line or at least one memorable line and think, yeah, that's it. Job's a good one.
yeah, hence the "my lifestyle determines my death style" lyric from Frantic, which you just immediately think, what does that mean? What?
Which Lars Ulrich bursts out laughing when he first hears it, and it might be an affectionate laughter. It might be a "Hey, that's great, James," but equally it might not.
Yeah, and you can see like Kirk Hammett's face at the bewilderment at the lyrics when he first reads it as well. You just, it's funny, man. It is pretty funny, to be honest.
It's a very funny film, isn't it?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I mean we'll get on to like my favorite part of the film, but I think just a bit of context onto Some Kind of Monster, because like I said, this was made by Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky, and Berlinger's an interesting person, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen any of the Paradise Lost films, but I've seen Brothers Keeper. And then, as you say, Berlinger went solo with initially quite rocky results. Like the first thing he did was Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, which,
Oh yeah, he did do that, didn't he? I forgot
yeah,
about
got.
that. Yeah.
I mean, you can't blame him too much for it. He says it was mangled by the studio, and I completely believe him. Um, but yeah, he's found a niche for himself, it would be fair to say by now.
And that niche is obviously the Netflix true crime
Yeah,
series that he's exploring at the minute, which, I mean, I don't have these days. I don't really have like much issues with true crime series as I once did, largely because I think the problem that I have with like this sea of a genre, if you want to call it that, is that
yeah,
there's too much like emphasizing and looking at the serial killing question and not enough about the victims that
yeah.
went through such horrific circumstances. And I kind of like to think Berlinger is kind of the reason why that is the case. And I know that's probably not fair blaming it on one filmmaker, but at the same time, he had a part to play on it, I think.
He sort of, yeah, he fed in on it, I guess. I mean, Paradise Lost, the trilogy, is about victims in the sense it's about people who were falsely accused, but I'm not sure how much it's about victims in terms of the people who were killed. I didn't see his Ted Bundy thing, and I had heard
No.
some people who were like adopting the crash position when it was announced that Zac Efron is playing Ted Bundy, who've said, actually, it's not as sort of tawdry as we were worried it was going to be, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen one of the Netflix series, the one that he did on John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer. Obviously, the serial killer who he was also a clown at the same time, a children's clown who would pop up at children's parties. It was very strange, but
Yes, yeah.
And very eerie, and must have been like the basis for like Stephen King's It or something like that. But
Yeah, you'd think, yeah.
So, and I think Berlinger, like I say, I mean, I don't want to blame him for like one thing, because I just think for like the sea of like Netflix true crime things, it's just like it's getting to the point now where it's a bit absurd. But at the same time, we've had stuff where actually, to be fair, it's been pretty decent. I mean, like look at the stuff that the BBC have been doing lately with The Reckoning with Jimmy Savile.
Reckoning, yeah,
It's a good
the
example. Yeah.
ITV one on the Yorkshire Ripper, The Long Shadow. I thought that was strong stuff.
Yeah, so I'm glad to see we're getting past this phase now where we're not just congratulating these horrible, terrible people to news.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, it has this. To me, I do enjoy a lot of true crime stuff, but the recent stuff has this issue where it has learned from the mistakes of the past, and it's not going to make people into like serial killers into icons, but it can't get past the fact that famous actor plays this famous serial killer is the sort of thing that opens producers' wallets, really.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you end up with these odd series like that one where Stephen Merchant played Stephen Port, where it's
What?
like, yeah, I mean
What?
he's good in it. It's an effective straight role in it. I can't remember what it's called, but it is quite weird that you've got this sort of household name playing a character who the drama keeps telling you is very boring, and you think, well, if he's that boring, you could have like cast someone who isn't interesting.
Oh, David Tennant is what was it? Dennis Nielsen.
Dennis Nielsen, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's another example. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's quite a weird thing, but I mean, I do think Brothers Keeper is a great movie. And you have to assume that a big part of the reason why they are doing this is because Metallica allowed their music to be used in Paradise Lost at a
Oh yeah.
massively reduced rate.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was crucial to the story. Part of the reason why the West Memphis Three were accused of these terrible crimes that they didn't commit was because they were like metal kids with a sort of edgelordy interest in Satanism, and the small town that they lived in thought, well,
Yes. Yeah.
that's enough to convict. So yeah, Metallica saw that that was a story worth telling. They realized that their music was necessary to telling it, and when they were at probably their biggest, they let Berlinger and Sinofsky use the music for much less than they'd have given it to anyone else. So, we're going to be saying some not so kind things about Metallica in the podcast, but that's something that I think they deserve a pat on the back for.
Yeah, at least,
Yeah.
because of so. And to be fair, I mean, to go back to like the Satanism argument, I mean, heavy metal and links to Satanism has been like constant throughout its history as a genre of music. I mean, look at like Black Sabbath and the shit that Ozzy Osbourne and co went through during like the 70s, when most people realizes that no, they sung about these kinds of topics, but at the same time, they were just kind of like four Birmingham lads having a laugh at the same time. So you can't really. It's not really fair to think that way.
And it's extra weird with something like Metallica because they were, I mean, they're obviously a metal band. You can't get away from them being a metal band. It's in their name. But they were a metal band who were big enough to be effectively mainstream. They were not even remotely ghettoized in the way that a lot of heavy metal bands have.
No, because like I say, this Saint Anger came way after like the likes of the Black Album or Master of Puppets, because it was like I say, those were the albums that made them on the thrash scene and then popularized them with the Black Album. Yeah, so it's not like a niche little market that they've fallen into.
No, and I think once something gets that big, it becomes kind of preposterous to say, "Oh, this is some dangerous underground kind of cultish thing." It's telling that when, like, you look at obscenity prosecutions and moral panics around films, the ones that succeed are always the ones that are against little low budget gore films. The
Yeah.
ones that don't work are when they go after Rambo or Aliens, because it's like, well, everyone's seen those movies.
Yeah. No, completely agree with that. It's that statement. Yeah, because it's like blaming Metallica for all this kind of thing is like it's just a very silly thing to do, to be honest. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's even sillier once you've watched Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, because the idea that these extremely comfortable, self-serious, middle-aged multi-millionaires are going to be like taking time out from their schedule to teach your teens how to do bad Satan murders is just absurd. Like,
It's so strange because it's like I said, the first thing we see out the gate is getting a therapist to talk through the band's issues.
yeah, yeah.
And you normally, and I don't understand, but hiring a therapist to sort out your group tensions is not the way you want to handle your band relationships, I think.
Well, certainly not in heavy metal.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe like the Norwegian black metal scene could have really benefited from a few
Oh God,
therapists
yeah.
being deployed.
Fucking yes. Okay, yeah, I agree with you there. Just to sort out like mayhem's shit. So
Yes. But yeah, it does feel like the premise for a sketch, doesn't it?
it does, yeah. It does feel like something that you would expect out of Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, and like I say, this is a problem, a recurring setup for the band as well, because constantly we see like I've forgotten the therapist's name, but he drops in and out of like the recording sessions and the
I
mixing
forgot the
sessions.
guy's name too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just has to like obviously deal with them as Metallica is just like imploding in on itself, basically.
Yeah, and it's a strange situation that has them imploding. And I mean, I like this film, but I think there are a few criticisms that I want to levy at it. And
Hmm.
I don't think it contextualizes Metallica enough
Hmm.
to really work. I think Berlinger and Sinofsky probably went into this thinking, I think they wanted to make it and I think they enjoyed making it, but I think they
Hmm.
thought this is going to mainly be of interest to Metallica fans. And it
Yeah.
isn't. A lot of people watch this who have no interest in Metallica whatsoever. And I think if they knew it was going to get that audience, there would be a bit more context of what the
Hmm.
band had been through and how their career had gone beyond, just reminding us that they really have sold a lot of albums.
Yeah. And like I say, that's the kind of thing because it's like I say, it's a very, very interesting premise, and like I said, just delving into like all these different things that are just going wrong. Because like I say, obviously there was the Napster lawsuit, there was Jason Newsted quitting the band as well, so it just falls into like all these different problems piling on top of one another until it just eventually explodes outwards.
And then in the middle of it all, James Hetfield decides to go to rehab, decides to go into anger management therapy. He comes back, he says he only wants to work set hours so he can devote more time to his family. And
Which
it's
is
like,
fair enough.
it's
Which is
fair
fair
enough.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you look at the set hours, you just realize, oh man, 12 till 4. What?
Yeah. Yeah. So everything is falling in
Okay.
on the band. Yeah. But the thing that I'm surprised they didn't mention is the main thing that sort of I remember from Metallica from when I was getting into music,
Mm.
which is the reception given out to Load and Reload, the two sort of themed albums that were the last sets of original material they released before Saint Anger. And that was like an attempt by them to stretch their musical palette and to give more sort of space for Hetfield's taste for country and blues. I think there's some good songs on there, but you know, the fact that I quite like some of the songs off Load in particular is probably an indication that the band have, you know, gone off the rails somewhere. Because if Metallica can make a song that appeals to me, a man who owns every single Eels album, they're probably not going to be appealing to people who actually like metal at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and like I say, you could definitely see that well, the proof is in the pudding as soon as you look at or listen to Saint Anger, because my God, because like I say, and it's detailed heavily in this film because there's like obviously because what it is. This album is like it's one giant group therapy session that they needed to get out of the system.
Yeah.
Basically, they needed to release a record, and but the thing is that it's one of those records that obviously has no regard to what came before in Metallica's career, has like this very set idea of like doing like making a wall of noise whenever you look at it.
It's
And
stock, Aidan. It sounds stock to my
it's like
ears.
to my fucking ears. Yeah, it's and it is stock. And yeah, and like I said, no guitar solos. Lars Ulrich's tuned his drums to make it sound like he's banging on a paint can or something like that, which is like the most memeable thing of the whole record. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's and like I say, and I think, like I say, had they not made Saint Anger, had they not at least released it, I think the band would have ended right then and there. Had they
Yeah,
not done
quite
it,
possibly. Yeah. Yeah,
right?
they have all these rules, as you say, no guitar solos. Lars will be playing the drums with a pencil on a half empty tin of Budweiser by the sound of it. And it's all explained as like their effort to compete with new metal, but not just in the sense of metal that is new, but the new metal scene exemplified by bands like Korn and Linkin Park. And like by the time this thing finally got finished, that scene was close to burnout anyway. So yeah, I've got no idea why Metallica spending all the time trying to be Limp Bizkit. To be honest, that seems like that's not a great ambition in my book.
Yeah. Like I say, and it's like I say, it's the results that are very telling of this because it's like I say, because nothing sounds like this. It doesn't sound like new metal at all. And I'm not
No.
defending new metal at all because, like I said, the only new metal band, if you can even define them as new metal, is System of a Down,
Hmm.
and System, and that's purely for political reasons as well because they're a very heavy political band as well. So but with this, it's just like bloody Nora. It's like constantly, and you also got to remember it's an album that lasts for like 70+ minutes as well.
Yeah. I mean, they were always good at albums that just fucking go on, really.
But yeah, it just seems to be like something that's kind of like pulled out of thin air, to be honest. And that's kind of the mantra of like what Berlinger kind of shows on this documentary of how they're just like kind of like getting ideas like plucked out of thin air, hammering away at it in a session. And it just doesn't work. Like I say, this is the reason why I bring up as like it's like a therapy session that should have really been private, but was let out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite an experience seeing people work so hard for so long at ideas that are so thin. Like,
Hmm.
there's a scene late on when they're doing the music video for, I think it was for the title track, and they're at that maximum security prison.
San Quentin,
And
wasn't it? Yeah.
was it San Quentin?
I think
Right,
it was San Quentin, yeah.
right. But they seem to be there as part of some sort of therapy process for the prisoners, I guess, or to give them some guidance as well. So you've
Hmm.
in between songs, you've got James Hetfield sat there saying, Saint Anger's really a song about anger. It's really about anger. And you think, I would hesitate before being this boring in front of people who've probably killed someone.
Yeah. And like I say, it's because I think the key lyric of like the title track is let me just quickly bring it up again.
It's Saint Anger round my neck, isn't it? It's
Saint
like
Anger.
a medal or a crucifix.
And the other bit brackets, you flush it out, you flush it out. What do you about the respect, the anger? I guess it's the anger, but at the same time, it's just like, this is what I mean by by James Hetfield as lyricist, because it's so unclear.
Do you think that maybe part of the appeal Metallica had earlier on was that, when their records were mixed properly, you couldn't actually hear this shit?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I mean, Master of Puppets probably has some dumb shit on it, but at the same time, it's like properly mixed,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
very decently. So you got to give that credit. So
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. I love all of the scenes of them in the studio trying to experiment. In particular, the one scene where Kirk Hammett is trying to like get a varied, speeded, droning sound from his guitar using a vibrator, which I'm gonna bitterly disappoint Kirk Hammett in the unlikely event that he's listening to this, but he was not the first guy to do that. The first guy to do that was Reeves Gabrels on Tin Machine 2. Good precedent, good example to follow.
oh dear. But yeah, it's like it's like I say, it's a bewildering thing to conceive because, like I say, there is just like so many disagreements, so many like I say, ideas plucked from thin air that's all hammered into like these recording sessions that honestly just feel like a series of Spinal Tap sketches stitched together. But it's monstrously entertaining to watch at the same time, just to see them bicker and disagree and argue and everything like that. I mean, like I said, my favorite bit is obviously when they're in the meeting room arguing again about the mixing, and you just see Lars just pacing backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, like not agreeing to James's newfound schedule for rehab. I just think, my God.
Is that the one where it ends with him just like leaning right into Hetfield's face and screaming "fuck you"?
Yeah, exactly. and
Amazing.
and that's the kind of magic that you get from this kind of fly in the wall documentary filmmaking.
Mm,
Just this spontaneity of what's happening in the moment, as
yeah.
well of like simple human behavior. And you got to give like the filmmakers credit for that, for just showing like this whole process and creating like a story out of it. Yeah.
It's funny because I don't think we're enjoying the movie on the level that Berlinger and Sinofsky want us to enjoy it as. I definitely do not think they went out there to reward a band who had helped them out when they were struggling first-time documentarians by
Hmm.
making them all look like spoiled millionaire assholes. But it is, as you say, tremendously entertaining.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, to be fair, there are segments in here that Berlinger includes and Sinofsky includes, but for reasons where I do think it works in their advantage. For example, when they do the radio promos,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which I did laugh a lot because it's just like, because it's just the last bit of Lars Ulrich leaning into the microphone and just saying, "This is Lars from Metallica. I'm about to shove 50 grand up your ass." before leaning back out, which I thought was pretty funny. And apart from that, it's just like I think that's probably the only case of intentional humor you get from it.
Yeah, I think it's even funnier because it implies that Lars Ulrich would voluntarily give away his money, which we know is absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
It does go a bit into the Napster thing, which I thought was funny. I really thought it does it very late on, and I really thought they were going to avoid it. But I'd completely forgotten that Lars Ulrich once appeared in public with like a list of the printed out screen names of people who had downloaded Metallica songs, like the fucking metal Joseph McCarthy.
I think my favorite bits in that is that Sinofsky and Berlinger use like this very crude flash animation in the middle of it, which just depicts like Lars Ulrich as this gobbling kite figure running up James Hetfield's arms, who's built like a brick shithouse.
James Hetfield is sort of drooling Frankenstein's monster thing, which is...
It's incredible. That's early internet for you, and but like I said,
Yes.
the Napster controversy I think fits rather well into this. But there are several bits of Metallica's story that I don't think quite fit as well into the documentary. Case in point, when it dives headfirst into Cliff Burton and
Oh
the
yeah,
need for a bass player as well, and I just don't think that works as well because it's a story that obviously fundamentally shaped them. Because if you don't know, Cliff Burton, their original bassist, tragically died in a motoring accident very early on, where the tour bus crashed, and there's still debate to this day what caused the crash.
yeah,
But with this, obviously Jason Newsted's just left, who was the second bass player who took over from Burton, and then they're left without one basically, and then Sinofsky kind of try to fit in the Burton story in their desperate search of finding or having them replace. And it's that classic Spinal Tap trying to replace your next bandmate, really, that kind of thing. And it just doesn't.
yeah,
It just fit in quite awkwardly, I think.
yeah. That's a fair point. It's one of the reasons why, even if it would have bored Metallica fans who know all this already, I do kind of wish there'd been more contextualizing information at the front, because I think it is
Mm.
important when you look at Jason Newsted's position in the band and how he left because he felt stifled and disrespected. It does help to know that he was like the replacement for someone who died suddenly and that they all still miss. I do think that helps you understand that strand of the story.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and like I say, there is like, and like I say, this is a documentary that goes over like 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I do think you could have shaved off at least 20 minutes from it
Yeah.
because there's this weird little segment where we see Lars Ulrich turning up at an auctioneering thing selling his patents. And then I'm just like sat there thinking, well, okay, I can kind of understand why you would include that, but at the same time, it's just like it doesn't really contribute much to the story, don't you think?
I think it's
Of the,
like
it's weird.
it's hitting one of the documentary's major themes, or at least one of the major themes as I saw it as I watched the documentary, which is that Lars Ulrich is so shit. Man, that dude is such a shitty guy.
Yeah.
His paintings are shit. His attitude is shit. His ear for what makes a good snare sound is obviously completely shit by this point.
It's kind of that segment kind of just pops out at random, and it's just like, oh, I'm here now, and I just kind of think, no, I think you could have cut that, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. By contrast, I think Hetfield, who seems to be the other guy who people come away from this documentary with a bad impression of, but Hetfield's just a sort of endearingly embarrassing dad, isn't he? Everything
Very
about
much
him is
so, yeah.
so dad.
Yeah. Even with by looking at his grandpa glasses, you would never think he was once the battle scarred singer of Metallica. Then he goes into rehab and he comes out a completely different person. So yeah.
There's like one early clip of him where he's talking about his his passion for like vintage hot rods, and he's standing in front of this absolute midlife crisis mobile with flames painted down his side, and he goes, "Rebellious is what this is." Like, I hate to break it to you, James, but it's not.
Oh yeah, bless his heart, but it's not working in his favor.
So we've talked about two of the members here. Kirk Hammett seems to be like just sort of hanging back and trying to get through it, doesn't he?
Yeah, he seems to be, like I say, to go back to like with Lars and Hetfield, kind of like is only at each other's throats, like fighting like mum and dad. Duff Punkle in the corner saying, "Guys, can we just get through this, please, and finish the record?"
Yeah.
Though he does come across as like sometimes he does come across like with his own opinions, like for example the lack of guitar solos on saying anger and his immediate vitriol. And in fact, we even hear a soundbite of someone saying, "Is someone going to tell him?" And then they tell him, and he just says, "No, that dates it to this period, not having any of those in." So, and you just, and like I said, Hammett's probably the third guy in the corner that you would expect that least from.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it adds some weight that his like one big creative disagreement is one that I think most Metallica fans would probably agree on, that it was a bad idea to veto guitar solos, and it does make it sound very early 2000s.
Like I said, yeah, and he's completely right that it dates it to this period, and you just end up thinking, well, yeah, this is just like bad decision after bad decision, and it's just really leading through a rabbit hole. And like I say, the fourth member of Metallica is constantly interchangeable, and we see like the selection process at the tail end, which I quite like, to be honest.
That was fun. Yeah, I enjoyed that scene.
And just seeing like all the bassists like try to like hammer away at what was it again? It's like Robert Trujillo was the guy who got the part, obviously, and he's still with Metallica to this day. And he was the only person in that room, and Sinofsky and Berlinger kind of correlate with this because he's the only guy that starts off playing battery, which I can't remember which record that came off, but instead it's just and every other bass player who shows up for that audition, like the filmmakers cut between them playing badly, hammering or awkwardly hammering away for whom the bell tolls, which is the famous Metallica bass line, obviously the one of the most famous. So it kind of like shows that he's thinking outside the box in that regard.
Yeah, that was nice, actually. Yeah. Newsted's sort of other role in this documentary is the subplot about Echo Brain, the band that he forms as a side project, and that he credits as having. He didn't want it to push him out the band, but the response to him starting another band from the other band members, he feels, did force him out.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, Newsted's obviously following on in that kind of line of bass players that fell through again and again. And like I said, it's not hard to obviously feel sympathy for the guy because at least he wanted to like break away from Metallica where the toxicity levels were kind of through the roof, to be honest. So, and like I say, the subplot involves, I think it's both Lars and Kirk going to an Echo Brain concert. And just to show this, obviously at the end of the gig, Newsted flees. Lars just completely says, well, you could have at least said hi or something like that. And you just think, well, no wonder he's obviously fled because of all the bad memories that he's kind of been through, So, and like I say, I think he comes across quite well in this doc, to be honest.
I do too. Yeah, I think if anything, he is slightly too innocent, really. I love the bit where he's like pleasantly surprised that Echo Brain's first gig is at this really nice upscale venue, and it's like, yeah, because it's the first gig by a band featuring a former member of Metallica. It's not going to be in some piss hole somewhere, but he has no sort of cynicism to him. He can't believe that they might be giving him a nicer venue because he's a big name and they want to attract people with his name. It's quite
Mm.
cute, I think.
Because you see Metallica as like these rock icons. I think this is a documentary that kind of shows them as people, as the way
Yeah.
they are, even for the amount of shitty things that Lars Ulrich or James Hetfield have done. It's just like you see them as people. I mean, even when are you aware of the Dave Mustaine subplot?
I mean, the film gives you sort of some context on what Mustaine's history with the band is, but I don't know anything about it that isn't in the film.
Yeah. So, like I say, Mustaine came very early on in Metallica's story. They had, again, like how it always hands out, they had a massive, I think they had like a row or something like that very early on, and Mustaine ended up leaving to form,
Mm,
like, obviously Metallica's rival Megadeth, which is a band that I have no interest in whatsoever. But, there's a scene here where Mustaine and Ulrich, at the time of Hetfield going into rehab, so being absent for nearly a year,
yeah.
where they have like a good heart-to-heart conversation in the therapy room and just going through obviously what they went through together. There's another scene that I quite like because it just kind of shows like obviously the band trying to fix like most of the problems, if not all problems they've had through like the checkered history, really.
Yeah, it reflects well on them that they're trying to fix a relationship that, where fixing it won't help them get the album out. Nobody seems to be expecting Dave Mustaine to come back to Metallica and help them
No,
finish
no.
Saint Anger. They're just doing it because they don't want there to be bad blood.
And like I say, at a time where honestly the future is uncertain and the band could just end with
Mm.
Hetfield leaving. So
It is kind of funny to me that the therapist has to work so hard to get, like, particularly Hetfield to sort of betray any kind of emotion. And Mustaine is just like a raw nerve, isn't he? He's practically in tears the whole time. And you
mm.
imagine the therapist is looking at this and thinking, I've really hitched my wagon to the wrong heavy metal band here.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Like I say, can you imagine him like doing that to Spinal Tap and try to sort through out all of Spinal Tap's issues?
Well,
Just be like,
they don't need it because they've already got the perfect working relationship where Nigel is like fire and David is like ice and Derek's in the middle like lukewarm water.
hmm. Yes. Whereas here it's all fire.
Yes.
Not all the one element.
Yeah. We should also talk about the person who lots of people, and by lots of people I mean just me, have called the fifth member of Metallica, who is Lars Ulrich's dad.
Yes. Of course. Yes. Is it? I've forgotten the guy's name, but is it
I've forgotten his name.
Ah,
He'll always be Lars Ulrich's dad to me.
tennis
Let's
playing guy there? Hang on. Torben Ulrich. That's the guy.
Corbin Ulrich. Yes, yeah.
Best
It,
mates with Dexter Gordon, of course.
it always comes back around to Dexter Gordon, I guess. That's going to be
Mm.
the rule from now on.
Mm.
Yes. Well, you can see how Lars's unique people skills have been learned well from his father, can't you?
Mm. Yeah, because like I say, he turns up a little bit in this, doesn't he? Where
Mm.
Hetfield's in rehab and they're kind of out in the countryside and talking about, like I say, the band and everything like that. So, like I say, it's only like a quick cameo, but my God, you can tell where Ulrich's got his attitude from.
My favourite thing about Lars's relationship with his father is that he says that the main thing that he got from his dad was a fear of status quo. I thought, yeah,
Right.
well, I've seen Bullock Quo, so I share your disdain.
But yeah, but it's interesting you bring up the fifth member of Metallica because I thought you were going to talk about Bob Rock for a minute.
Yeah, yeah. And he does play quite a bit here, doesn't he? While they're having this constant roundabout of, who's going to be the new bassist? Is James going to be back in time? He plays quite a bit on the finished album, I think.
Yeah, no, he does. He kind of does the bass lines, for the bass tracks, and we see him like quite often. But I think with Bob Rock, it's kind of interesting because, like I say, he previously produced Metallica before, so he did, I think, the
Mm.
Black Record or something like that, and he comes back for this. But at the same time, he was so you can kind of tell the guy's fed up in a lot of ways, where he's
Yeah,
just just tired of doing this and just like, and it only really did this just to be their friend, really,
yeah,
and just to be a helping hand. Because beforehand, if there was like Black Era Bob Rock, he would just be like obviously telling them to obviously play better, or no, this idea is not working, you should do this. And parts of that come
yeah.
up here and there, but at the same time, you just get this nature of him that it's just like I say, I just can't be bothered anymore. It's like,
Well, like he said later on, I believe that his motivation in making Saint Anger was just to keep the band together. And if
mm.
it doesn't, to put it mildly, if it doesn't sound like a classic polished Bob Rock production job, that's because that's all he was doing. He was just trying to like channel them into doing something that would keep them together rather than make a masterpiece.
Yeah, and you can clearly tell that by listening to the finished project because, like I say, it's very easy to see Saint Anger as like this in utero type record, really.
I
And
think that's probably what they were going for, isn't it? Like
yeah,
the raw return to form, no more of that country shite. This is a proper metal album.
yeah, like I say. But the thing is that James Hetfield is no Kurt Cobain, and Bob Rock's certainly no Steve Albini either. And
No,
yeah, it's hmm,
I think the other thing that I noticed immediately about Bob Rock, which is shallow and silly, but it tickles me. I know Bob Rock has been in bands, but when you look at him and you look at the members of Metallica, man, you can see which one of these guys spends all his time behind a studio desk, such twiddling dials,
yeah.
because he looks like one of the Beach Boys. He is this like cherubic LA guy with this big flowing mane of hair, and they all look like grizzled heavy metal alcoholics because they have.
That's true. That's very true.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think I went into it as no fan of Metallica. I came out of it as no fan of Metallica, but I had a lot of fun with the movie.
It is, yeah, and like I say, it is a fun watch. And like I say, I mean, I think its only downfalls that it is like 2 hours 20 minutes long, and I think that's like
Yeah,
rough edit territory. Like
yeah,
when you
yeah,
could have like shaved like 20 minutes off it easily. I think that's my main sticking point with it. But apart from that, like I say, it's a fun watch, and I think it's very entertaining for the reasons that I don't think Berlinger or Sinofsky proved to do, but at the same time,
yeah.
they have made a memorable thing. They have made a memorable doc that, and you don't really see that many documentaries like exploring like a band that are on the verge of like explosion. You don't really get to see
No,
that often.
it's the sort of thing that you always see in retrospect. That's the beauty of some kind of monster to me. It's the kind of situation that you normally only see in like the last 5 minutes of a VH1 behind the music with
Mm,
people talking about it 20 years later. But no, here it's happening right before your eyes. It's happening now, which
mm,
is exciting. Yeah,
yeah, and like I said, and they deserve credit for that,
yeah,
and just for making a damn strong film, I think as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Aidan, would you like to remind listeners where they can find you?
Yep, you can find me on Letterboxd under the username Aidan F, where I post semi regularly when I can. Obviously when the time allows it. But apart from that, you can find me on X under the username Doco and Drummer, and occasionally on Pop Screen as well as the Uncut Network, very occasionally as well. So you can find me anywhere, anywhere there.
Yep. I write for the Geek Show. I'm on Instagram at Graham W Films. You can find me on Letterboxd as well. Just search for Graham Williamson. and I have a website, grahamwilliamsonfilms.com, where you can find all of my other articles and videos in one extremely handy place, should you need that, which you probably won't. But in a fortnight's time, we'll be back. I think the current plan, don't hold me to this because it's a last minute seat of the pants plan like everything we do. The current plan is that in a week's time, there will be part 1 of the Geek Show's Best of 2023 on the Directors Uncut feed. And then on a fortnight's time, we'll come back on the Pop Screen feed to finish it off. But until then, I've been Graham.
And I've been in.
And we'll see you next week.